Welcome to Kitchen Table Conversations, a series of short and shareable conversation starters for those of us who have or love and support people with a complicated and beautiful brain. Here's your host, Angela Geddes.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another edition of Kitchen Table Conversations, the very first one of the year 2023. Boy, I'm having a hard time getting my head around that one. I guess the older we get, the more we realize how quickly time goes by, and sometimes that leaves us a little bit concerned, I suppose, to say the least. But then most of the time, I hope it leaves us feeling like, there's some real opportunities to grab onto things, and that life is fairly short, and sometimes the days feel a little bit longer, but the years certainly go by really quickly. So for me, the new year always kind of provides me with a bit of an opportunity to say, okay, so what's next? What are we going to do? And what is this next year going to look like? And for a lot of us, we all know that this is the time for New Year's resolutions. And I think most of us realize that a lot of New Year's resolutions that are made this time of the year don't actually come to fruition. So I personally am not really a big New Year's resolution person, but instead I try to use it again as an opportunity to say, what is this next year going to look like, and what kinds of things am I interested in that I can either build upon, or what kinds of things do I like that's happening that I'm going to keep on doing, and what are some of the things that I'm not so crazy about that I maybe do need to make some adjustments. But for me personally, and I guess because I am a helper and a social worker, I really feel like New Year's resolutions should circle around our own self-care. And by self-care, again, I've said this before and I'll say it again. For me, it's not a trip to the spa, although absolutely, if you can afford it and it works for you, that could be a really good day. But it's about incorporating self-care into our every single day. So how do we bring elements of the spa to our lives? And, when we go to the spa, for example, it's because we want somebody to take good care of our back muscles. We wanted somebody else to take good care of our skin. And we want to drink a lot of water. And we want to follow that kind of routine for the day and take some of those tips and pieces of advice. But why not do that on a more regular basis so that we don't have to do that all in one day? I kind of think about this in terms of a vacation as well. Obviously, everybody loves a vacation if you're able to do it, or a Saturday afternoon with not much on your plate and a walk in the woods and that kind of thing. But how can we create elements of our vacation? What brings those moments of joy, of peace, of contentment, of maybe more social time? What are the elements of a vacation or your ideal circumstance that really are meaningful to you? And how can you bring those kinds of things into your day-to-day? So if rest is a priority and you seem to only find time to do that while you're on vacation, there's an opportunity. And if healthy lifestyle and exercise is something that's really important to you, but you only have time to do it on the weekends or during vacation, how can we make some adjustments in order to incorporate that kind of thing into more of our day-to-day? So some of the more popular New Year's resolutions always include to exercise more. I know that Jamie always goes to the gym, and he has forever and ever, and he's a regular at the Y, but he always kind of doesn't look as forward to going in January because it seems to be much, much busier than it normally is, and certainly than it will be come February. So, that's a big one for us. And obviously, I'm very supportive of people who are able to fit exercise into more of their day-to-day and to be able to stick to it. But again, it's about making realistic goals that will work for us. And another one is to lose weight. And again, it's more of a focus on how you feel rather than how you look necessarily, right? But if you can run up the stairs and not get winded, that's a really good day. Doesn't really matter what size you are, but if you're healthy, that feels better. Also, it's another one is to get more organized, and that seems to be a big one for me these days because, well, for a variety of reasons, my office is a bit of a mess. So I need to get onto that. But I need to get onto that whether it's January 1st or not, right? Those kinds of things, and living with a bit of disarray or a bit of clutter. I mean, for those people who do struggle with any kind of anxiety or low moods or that kind of thing, living in busyness and chaos and disorganization can really add to our discontent and our distress. So getting organized is always a good deal. Getting out a new calendar, getting out a new notepad or a journal, doing those kinds of things to help you along can really make the world a difference. Another really good New Year's resolution is to learn a new skill or hobby. Some people like to save money, some people like to quit smoking. And again, if healthy living is your goal, then obviously those are really, really important. And in order to make it more likely that we will be successful in reaching our goals or our resolutions, many people would agree that it's really, really important to kind of plan for it and mentally prepare for this kind of change. And really and truly setting goals that motivate us or making this resolution for you rather than for somebody else can also be really, really important. And making our goals manageable, sometimes breaking them down a little bit. Some would suggest, and I would certainly agree, that it's a really good idea to write them down. That's sometimes half the battle, to make that commitment to yourself. But then in addition to that, you can really increase your likelihood of being successful if you actually tell a friend or make it public. So if you decide to join a running group, which I did, it was amazing how motivating that was for me to know that I was going to be accountable to my friends and that we were developing this kind of plan to succeed together. So it was really, really motivating. So there's nothing wrong with a little bit of positive peer pressure. Sometimes it's really important to, or really helpful, to kind of automate or to schedule some reminders to keep you on track. And if you do fall off, that's okay. Just get back on it. And they say, and it makes sense, that you're going to be more likely to succeed if you get back on quickly. So the one New Year's resolution or the goal that really speaks to me this year is the one around learning a new skill this year. And for those of you who have been following me, you may already know that we are just ready to launch our first ever social work training that's specific for people who are working with complex mental health conditions and people who want to enhance their existing ability to screen, to accurately assess, and to support and to refer people who do have a complicated and beautiful brain. And lots of times these complications are related to prenatal alcohol exposure, but not always. Sometimes we have complex neurodevelopmental disorders that result from trauma, that result from other prenatal exposures, and from our genes and from our DNA. I've often said that it really doesn't matter if it's tomato soup or sour milk that caused the problem. I mean, it does in terms of prevention to understand what may have interfered with development, but really once we have a condition, what's most important is that we understand what's really going on, how our brain works, how we learn, and how we can navigate our social circles, etc., in order to be most successful. And we as social workers have a responsibility to be able to better screen and assess, support, and refer. So I'm really, really excited about this training opportunity that's set to begin on February the 15th, and it'll run for a total of 6 weeks. So please check out the website for more details around that. But just to give you a little bit of a rundown, again, the program will run for 6 weeks, with the first session helping all of us to understand why we should be concerned, what kinds of things are maybe hidden or misunderstood within our practice, and what social workers and frontline therapists can do within our scope of practice to contribute to comprehensive multidisciplinary assessments. This first session will also provide a bit of an overview around the Canadian guidelines for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder diagnosis, and will focus on the importance of screening and the full multidisciplinary team assessment. And there'll be some discussion around further training opportunities and options for people to hone in on their assessment skills in that multidisciplinary context. The second module is going to focus on stigma and mental health. And that was really going to explore, as I've often said, the existing stigma that still exists for people who are experiencing mental health conditions of any kind. And then, it's still very surprising to see how many people continue to sort of suffer or struggle in silence, assuming that they should be able to handle this kind of thing on their own. And then we will be exploring other things that compound mental health and stigma, which also would include the screening for adverse childhood experiences. And we'll take a good look at trauma, and then of course we'll talk about mental health and addictions within the family context itself. Participants will be asked to sort of check their own biases and their own understanding of what would constitute, a healthy and productive family, and what would make good parents, in quotes, and what also contributes to those well-behaved children, again, in quotes. Our third session is going to focus on developmental screens and histories and how we can augment them, once again looking at more through the developmental or the complex developmental lens, looking at that long-term kind of difficulties that we've seen over the years. And we will focus on the fact that assessments of all kinds begin with relationships, and typically and historically social workers, particularly those of us who have worked within child protection, there can be quite a tension between child welfare and child protection workers and family, and it's often seen to be kind of an us against them, which is, we are changing that, but we've got a ways to go to kind of build that trust. So we'll talk about confirming, what's really going on with the family and whether or not there has been some exposures prenatally. We'll talk about who does this and how do we do it and some of the ethical considerations. And then certainly looking back at a really good developmental history to say, what has this family and this individual already been through, and how can we augment these existing assessments to make it, the most seamless and easiest for families, and certainly for the individual being assessed. So session 4 is going to focus on what we as social workers can do, what our assessment report would look like, and how we can really be helpful to individuals who are struggling with complexities that maybe haven't been well understood to this point. Who do we share this information with, and how do we formulate some recommendations that would be customized and individual-based and certainly strength-based, so that we can lead families to a pathway of more helpful and relevant support services. And then session 5 is going to focus on now what. So what do we do within our own existing practices if we're providing private practice, for example, in counseling and therapy? How, now that we have a better understanding of what might be going on with an individual, and again, making it clear that we as social workers cannot make formal diagnoses around complex neurodevelopmental disorders, but we can certainly do a better job of screening and identifying and putting people on a pathway to, full multidisciplinary and complex assessment services. But we can also start immediately to be more helpful in terms of our own approaches, recognizing that there might be something a little bit more complicated going on. And this could be beyond poor parenting and poor decision making, for example, and maybe it's neurological or brain-based, and we need to consider that. So how can we adjust our own services? How can we provide good parent education and family support? How can we link them to some of the provincial caregiver support programs that are out there? Again, making sure that we create sort of warm transfers and circles of support for people, because if this is something more complex, we might need to look at, longer term supports and interventions. So again, connecting to online resources. And then session 6 would then be focused on putting this all into action. So this is going to be really interactive. We'll be bringing in some case studies. We'll be asking participants to submit some cases that they've been working on or that they've got some questions about, and together we'll continue to learn and continue to put our heads together to make sure that families are supported in a really good way. So I think most of you would know by now that I'm pretty passionate about building a more inclusive service delivery system so that families have, experience fewer wrong doors, individuals experience fewer wrong doors, and people are better understood and really more relevantly supported. So in the spirit of new opportunities and hope for the future, I'm really pleased to be able to provide this training. And then I also wanted to leave you with the understanding that I have learned a long, long time ago. And I really can't remember exactly where I read it, but when I was doing a little bit of research this morning, that Earl Nightingale wrote a book called The Strangest Secret. and that he also went on to have much more success through his storied career. But one piece of advice that particularly stands out and certainly stood out to me was during a radio program. He stated, if you spend 1 extra hour a day in the study of your chosen field, you'll be an expert in 5 years or less. So I remember reading that and thinking to myself that at the time I had a diploma in child and youth work and kind of realized that that wasn't going to be enough to keep me going. So I did go back to school a couple more times after that. But while I was working at a community health center and teaching parenting education and offering support in that capacity, I knew that I had some more to learn. I didn't learn enough while I did my 3 years in college. So I would often spend an hour reading in the evening, and I just kept doing that. And I did that because, again, I wanted to do a good job. I wanted to make sure that I was keeping up on the evidence and providing the kind of care that I would be proud of and that certainly would make a difference in people's lives. So some people would say that maybe I worked too hard because that was above and beyond the 8 hours that I already put into work. But for me, it made me feel more competent and confident in delivering the kinds of services that I wanted to. So for me, it was a win-win, and it was, again, part of my self-care. So that's different for everybody, and but I was certainly motivated by that quote and recognizing that now I'm able to provide training and provide education and share what I've learned because I did some of that extra work. So there's something to be said about that too. And, I used to coach ringette, and I coach baseball, and I used to be a pitcher, and I used to, practice and practice and practice way more than what our team did, because if I wanted to go up on the pitching mound and not embarrass myself, I needed to work at it. And I think that any successful hockey player would tell you the same thing, that you don't just learn how to be an amazing hockey player by showing up to practices once or twice or 3 times a week. You have to do some of that stuff at home as well, if this is something that you really want to do, and if this is something that you really want to become an expert in. Again, hockey's not for everybody. Reading about parenting books is not for everybody, but I encourage everyone to find a thing, because I do believe that we all do better when we have a sense of purpose, and certainly when we find someone, hopefully someone, but certainly someone or something to love, something to do, and something to hope for. So with that being said, thanks once again for hanging out with me. If you like what you hear, please feel free to share, and check out my website for more links that will provide you with more details around how to be as successful as you can be while forming your own New Year's resolutions. And then certainly there'll be some more details on my website around the training that I spoke of. So wishing you all the best as we begin this next new promising year. With many thanks, Angela.